Commander Selka, or had signed the report that said Earth could not defend itself. 6 months later, she stood beneath the suspended tactical display of the Galactic Council and watched an invasion fleet move toward the planet her signature had helped expose. The Meridian Chamber was built to make individual mistakes feel small. Its ceiling rose 300 meters above the delegates. Tier after tier of representatives curved around the central floor, each station shaped for a different body, atmosphere, or sensory system. Above them floated a projection of the Sol system. A yellow star burned at its center. Earth was a blue point near the inner edge. And beyond it, approaching through the authorized transit corridor, 63 crimson markers moved in perfect formation. The Carred Ascendancy had arrived. Estimated system entry in 18 minutes, Selka said. Her voice carried across the chamber. First speaker Alice Vedran sat high above her, wrapped in the silver ceremonial mantle of the council. His species had thin, translucent skin, and Selka could see the tension moving through the muscles along his jaw. Earth has been notified. Yes. The Carred. Repeatedly. Vedran glanced toward the human delegation. Ambassador Myra Vance sat alone at the narrow station assigned to Earth. She wore no military uniform, no medals, no ceremonial cloak, only a dark jacket with a small silver emblem at the collar. For the past 3 hours, representatives had shouted around her, argued above her, quoted treaties at her, and explained why the Galactic Council could not legally stop the Carred fleet. Myra had barely raised her voice. Now she stood. First speaker. The chamber quieted. Vedran looked down at her. Ambassador, I would like the Council's position entered into the permanent record one final time. A few delegates shifted. Selka felt something cold settle between her shoulders. Myra continued. The Carred Ascendancy has declared its intention to enter our system with an armed fleet. Yes, Vedran said. Earth has denied them permission. Yes. They are continuing anyway. That is correct. And because Earth has not yet completed accession to the Mutual Defense Compact, the Galactic Council will not deploy forces to stop them. Vedran hesitated. Correct. Myra nodded once. And the Council's transit ruling remains active. Selka looked at the tactical map. That ruling was the part nobody in the chamber wanted discussed too closely. The Carred had not been granted permission to attack Earth. Technically, they had requested passage through a council-administered corridor bordering human space for what they called a security expedition. The Council had approved the passage because Earth was outside the Defense Compact, and because, according to the strategic assessment, the Carred expedition posed no meaningful danger to wider Council stability. Selka's assessment. Her words. Her signature. Vedran answered carefully. The transit authorization remains valid. Myra looked toward Selka. Not accusingly. That almost made it worse. Commander Orr, Myra said, does the Council still maintain the assessment that Earth lacks sufficient strategic military infrastructure to resist a major fleet action? Every eye in the chamber turned toward Selka. She could have softened the answer. She could have hidden behind procedural language. Instead, she did what she had always done. She gave the accurate answer. Yes. Myra held her gaze. Based on what? Selka brought up the relevant files. Earth maintains localized patrol forces, orbital defense craft, ground-based interceptors, and limited deep space security vessels. None constitute a fleet capable of contesting a Carred formation of this scale. Another diagram appeared. Millions of white points filled the inner system. The Helios array, Selka continued, is extensive, but the Council inspection classified it as civilian infrastructure, power distribution, climate regulation, orbital industry, communications, asteroid processing, agricultural support. Negligible strategic value, Myra said. Those were the exact words from Selka's report. Yes. Myra nodded. Thank you. She turned toward the speaker. Earth requests that the entire exchange be preserved in the official session record. Vedran looked uncomfortable. So ordered. Myra sat. That was all. No threat. No warning. No dramatic final statement. Selka disliked that more than she would have disliked anger. The crimson markers kept moving. 17 minutes. The Kar-Ed fleet was commanded by War Marshal Terk Valn, a professional officer with 40 years of combat experience and no record of reckless engagements. Selka knew because she had studied him. He was not an idiot charging blindly toward an unknown enemy. He had requested the same information she would have requested. Human fleet strength, orbital weapons, military shipyards, strategic reserves, known weapons platforms. Council analysts had given him accurate answers. That was the important part. There had been no deception. Earth genuinely possessed fewer dedicated warships than the Kar-Ed force. Its biggest orbital network genuinely was civilian. Valn had simply looked at the numbers and reached the same conclusion Selka had. Earth could not stop him. A communication request appeared over the human station. Myra accepted it. A man appeared on the screen behind her. Ambassador. Director Wren. Selka recognized him from the council files. Elias Wren. Director of Helios Emergency Coordination. An engineer. Not an admiral. Not even officially military. Myra glanced at the countdown. Status. Array responding normally. Civilian traffic is clearing designated corridors. Orbital habitats are entering emergency configuration. Any failures? 3,212 nodes unavailable for maintenance. Selka almost frowned. 3,000 failures sounded enormous until she remembered the Helios array contained millions of independent units. Myra asked, "Does that affect coverage?" "Not meaningfully." "Understood." Wren looked past her toward the chamber. "Has the council changed its ruling?" Myra looked at Vedran. "No." "Then we proceed under independent defensive authority." Vedran leaned toward his microphone. Director Wren, the Galactic Council strongly urges Earth to avoid any action that could create a wider military escalation. Wren blinked. Selka had seen diplomats hide contempt behind 10,000 elegant phrases. Wren managed it with one blink. "First speaker," he said, "an armed fleet is 18 minutes from crossing a boundary we have explicitly told them not to cross." 17, Selka corrected automatically. Wren glanced at her. "Thank you, Commander." Then he looked back toward Vedran. The escalation has already occurred. The connection ended. The tactical clock dropped below 15 minutes. War Marshal Valn transmitted his final demand. Earth was to shut down all orbital defense systems, surrender access to 3 outer system industrial stations, and accept Kar-Ed inspection teams at designated military facilities. Myra rejected it in 9 words. "You do not have authorization to enter human space." Valn replied personally. "Ambassador Vance, your government has had sufficient opportunity to reconsider. So have you. We possess no hostile intentions toward your civilian population." "Then turn around." You lack the force necessary to dictate that condition. Myra's expression did not change. Turn around. The channel closed. Selka watched the countdown. 5 minutes. 3. 1. The Car-Red fleet crossed the boundary. For several seconds, absolutely nothing happened. A quiet exhalation moved through the chamber. Some delegates visibly relaxed. Selka did not. She was looking at Earth system map. Something was changing. At first she thought the display had suffered a rendering error. The white points representing the Helios array were moving. Not translating through space. Rotating. One by one, then by thousands, then by hundreds of thousands. Power transfer sails changed angle. Climate mirrors tilted. Industrial reflectors reoriented. Communication platforms rolled on their axes. Solar collectors that had faced the star for years adjusted by fractions of a degree. Within 12 seconds, more than 2 million civilian objects had altered orientation. A council tactical technician whispered, "What are they doing?" Selka stepped closer to the projection. The white points had always looked like background noise. Now they formed patterns. Overlapping cones. Fields. Corridors. Lines extending across millions of kilometers. Her stomach tightened. "Reclassify the Helios array," she ordered. The technician hesitated. "To what?" Selka stared at the map. "I don't know." That was when the Car-Red fleet fired its first missile. The missile came from an outer destroyer. A small shot by fleet standards. Probably intended as a warning. It accelerated toward a human patrol vessel holding position between the fleet and Earth. Selka tracked it automatically. Range. Velocity. Guidance profile. Interception window. The human patrol ship did not fire. No orbital battery activated. No defense craft moved. The missile traveled 7,000 kilometers. Then something touched it. The tactical display registered no impact. No projectile. No explosive burst. Only a temperature spike along one side of the missile's guidance housing. The spike lasted less than 2 seconds. A second followed. Then a third from another angle. The missile began to rotate. Its guidance system corrected. More heat struck the opposite side. The missile corrected again. Its movements became increasingly aggressive. "Source," Selka demanded. "Multiple sources. Human weapons platforms." "No." The technician magnified the region. 7 Helios mirrors had aligned across a spread of nearly 500,000 kilometers. They were redirecting sunlight. Not enough to destroy the missile. Enough to heat specific external surfaces at specific moments. Enough to confuse its attitude control. The missile missed the patrol vessel by 60 kilometers and passed into empty space. Silence filled the chamber. Then 10 Car-Red ships opened fire. This was no warning. 47 missiles left their launch cells. Human orbital defense craft finally moved. But instead of charging toward the incoming weapons, they scattered. Selka initially thought they were retreating. Then she saw why. They were clearing the Helios firing geometry. Hundreds of mirrors rotated. Some were tiny. Others were vast structures kilometers across. Their reflected energy crossed the system in carefully timed sequences. The missiles began showing thermal alerts. One lost its primary sensor. Another suffered a guidance failure. 6 changed course, just enough that their predicted impact solutions vanished. A dozen broke formation while attempting automatic corrections. Human interceptors destroyed only 9. The Helios array handled the rest by ruining their accuracy. War Marshal Vaughn ordered his fleet to spread. Selka saw the order before the ships moved. It was logical. The human system appeared dependent on concentrated lanes of reflected energy. A wider formation would divide the network's attention. Kared ships accelerated outward. Selka almost whispered, "Don't." Too late. The outer ships moved into wider arcs. Their radiators unfolded farther to compensate for increased engine output. Heat management was the silent law behind every starship ever built. Reactors generated heat. Weapons generated heat. Engines generated heat. A vessel could possess armor thick enough to survive direct attack, but it still had to release waste energy somewhere. Radiators were not glamorous enough to appear in recruitment posters. They were also impossible to eliminate. Selka watched Helios mirrors realign. Not toward hulls, toward radiators. A Kared cruiser registered an external temperature rise. Then another. Then 6. No single mirror delivered enough energy to matter. Thousands acting together did. One cruiser reduced thrust. Another shut down 2 weapon banks. A destroyer retracted its radiator fins, which protected them, but immediately forced its reactor into a lower operating state. Across the formation, the same problem appeared. The Kared had spread out to avoid concentration. Instead, they had exposed more surface area to a distributed system that was already distributed far beyond them. Vaughn changed formation again. Selka respected the speed of his response. He ordered rotating shield orientations and intermittent engine burns. The fleet began maneuvering unpredictably. Helios tracking lagged. For nearly a minute, Kared performance improved. Then Earth adjusted. Not with a new weapon. With scheduling. Platforms stopped attempting constant pressure. Instead, small mirror groups engaged different targets for fractions of a second, forcing Kared ships to waste cooling capacity reacting to threats that vanished immediately. Others reflected light toward optical sensors. Not enough to damage them. Enough to force protective filters to engage. Radar and LiDAR took over. Then human relay drones filled those channels with harmless decoys. The Kared were not being destroyed. They were being made inefficient. Every action cost them more than it cost Earth. More fuel. More cooling. More processor time. More coordination. More mistakes. Selka opened her old report. He LLOS array, civilian. Correct. Primary functions, power distribution, climate management, industrial support. Correct. Military design features, none identified. Correct. Her eyes moved to the line that had mattered. Strategic value and direct fleet engagement, negligible. She read it again. For the first time in her career, Selka hated a sentence she had written. Nothing in the report was false. That was the problem. The measurements were accurate. The conclusion was not. Myra Vance approached the council command table. Commander Orr. Selka looked up. Did Earth conceal this capability during inspection? Myra's face remained unreadable. No. Selka pulled up the inspection records. You allowed council teams aboard Helios maintenance stations. Yes. You provided technical specifications. Yes. You disclosed the coordination network. In full. Selka searched. There it was. A line she remembered reading and dismissing. Emergency System-Wide Synchronization Protocol. Its purpose was listed as maintaining power distribution after solar storms, industrial accidents, debris impacts, or infrastructure failures. Selka stared at it. You told us. Myra nodded. We told you what the system did. But not that it could do this. You never asked. The words landed harder than an accusation. Selka looked back at the battle. No. Not battle. Not yet. A battle implied two forces exchanging destruction. This was closer to a system refusing to cooperate with an intruder. The Helios array had not transformed into a secret gun. It was still doing what it had always done. Moving energy. Tracking objects. Coordinating millions of independent nodes. Redirecting resources. Protecting infrastructure. The humans had simply designed emergency authority broadly enough that, when the emergency was an invasion, those same capabilities became defensive. They built resilience, Selka said. Myra heard her. Yes. Not a weapons network. No. Selka felt the full shape of the mistake. The Council had counted weapons. Humanity had counted functions. War Marshal Vaughn transmitted again. This is War Marshal Terk Vaughn to Earth Unified Command. Your interference constitutes an attack on Kared military assets. Director Wren answered. You crossed our defense boundary after being ordered not to. You have disabled systems aboard 17 vessels. You fired first. You are using civilian installations in military action. Wren paused. Yes. The simplicity of the answer seemed to disorient Vaughn more than denial would have. Wren continued. They are ours. A Kared representative stood in the council chamber. This is unlawful weaponization of civilian infrastructure. Selka turned toward him. No. The representative froze. She heard her own voice harden. I inspected that infrastructure. It was not weaponized. You are watching it attack our fleet. I am watching energy management equipment manage energy. That distinction is absurd. No, the distinction is why your fleet is losing. The chamber erupted. Vedran called for order. Selka barely heard him. She was watching Vaughn. The war marshal had stopped advancing. 31 minutes after entering human space, the Kared fleet was still largely intact. But its formation was broken. 7 ships were running reduced reactor output. 11 had unreliable targeting. 20 were consuming coolant reserves at unsustainable rates. None had reached firing distance of Earth. Vaughn could still withdraw. Selka hoped he would. Then the Kared flagship opened its launch bays. A new marker appeared. Much larger. Selka's tactical display identified the weapon by profile. Her blood went cold. Kinetic penetrator. The chamber quieted immediately. The weapon was primitive in concept. Mass. Velocity. Nothing more. No guidance system that sunlight could confuse. No reactor to overheat. No electronics necessary once its trajectory was established. The Kared had found the one category of attack Helios could not easily persuade to stop. The penetrator accelerated toward Earth. Myra Vance went completely still. Not frightened. Focused. Selka looked at the predicted impact. Northern Hemisphere. Ocean strike. The damage projection populated. Then she stopped reading. Time to impact. 26 minutes. The human patrol ships accelerated. They fired. Their weapons struck the projectile. Minimal effect. Its mass was too great. More human craft launched from lunar facilities. Still not enough. Vaughn's voice returned. Earth Unified Command, stand down the Helios array and accept inspection terms. The projectile can still be diverted using Kared correction craft. Ren answered. No. Vedran leaned toward Myra. Ambassador, perhaps temporary compliance. Myra turned on him. For the first time, anger entered her face. Do not. Vedran stopped. You gave that fleet passage, she said. Ambassador. You declined our defense request. You affirmed that decision minutes before they entered our system. Do not now ask Earth to surrender because your assessment was wrong. Vedran's skin flushed dark. Selka looked at the projectile. 24 minutes. Director Ren, she said. Commander. Can Helios stop it? A pause. Working on it. That was not comforting. The system map changed. Thousands of white points shifted. Then tens of thousands. Selka enlarged the projectile. Helios beams converged along one side. The temperature rose. Not rapidly enough. The penetrator was built to survive re-entry. Heating its surface would not destroy it. Selka looked at the vector calculations. Then she understood. They're not trying to destroy it. The technician beside her looked confused. Selka pointed. They're creating asymmetric ablation. Myra glanced over. Selka continued more urgently. Heat one surface hard enough and material vaporizes. The escaping material produces thrust. Very little thrust, the technician said. Yes. Selka watched the clock. 22 minutes. But they don't need much. Thousands more mirrors aligned. The projectile's outer material began vaporizing. Microscopic thrust accumulated. The trajectory line moved. Barely. Impact remained Earth. More mirrors joined. The sun itself had become the power source. No reactor could match it because humanity had not tried to build one that could. They had built millions of devices capable of borrowing tiny pieces of the star. 18 minutes. The predicted impact moved 3 kilometers. Then 7. Then 15. Still Earth. Vaughn ordered several ships to fire on the Helios network. Missiles launched. That forced the humans to divert mirrors. The trajectory correction slowed. Selka looked at Vedran. Cancel the transit authorization. The speaker stared at her. What? Cancel it. The authorization is already operationally irrelevant. No. Selka stepped toward the central floor. It is politically relevant. This is not the time. This is exactly the time. Vedran's expression hardened. Commander Orr, return to your station. Selka did not move. My assessment was used to justify the authorization. That assessment was accepted by the full strategic committee. I wrote it. We can review responsibility after the crisis. If Earth is struck in 16 minutes, there may not be an after that looks anything like this chamber. A murmur spread through the delegates. Vedran lowered his voice. What are you asking? Selka brought up the council charter. Article 73. Transit authorization may be revoked immediately if the authorized party uses the route to initiate an unapproved sovereignty violation. The Karad argue this is a security action. Earth explicitly denied entry. That issue is disputed. No first speaker. Selka pointed toward the recording from earlier. Myra's final question. Vedran's final answer. Earth had objected. The council had known. The fleet entered anyway. There is no dispute. The penetrator continued toward Earth. 14 minutes. Selka felt every second. Cancel it. Vedran looked around the chamber. He was searching for political shelter. There was none. Not anymore. Authorization revoked, he said. Selka held his gaze. Formally, Vedran's mouth tightened. He activated the chamber record. The Galactic Council hereby revokes transit authorization CAR-ED 79, effective immediately. The CAR-ED Ascendancy's continued armed presence within the Sol system is recognized as unauthorized. Myra closed her eyes for half a second. Not relief. Recognition. Something had finally shifted. 13 minutes. The projectile's predicted impact moved toward the eastern coastline. Still catastrophic. Human ships continued firing. Helios mirrors adjusted. Then Selka saw a new movement. Orbital factories. Large civilian structures near Mercury had begun releasing clouds of reflective material. Not weapons. Manufacturing foil. Thousands of tons of ultra-thin industrial sheet normally used for solar collectors. The foil spread. Sunlight struck it. The Helios network redirected more light through the expanding surfaces. Energy concentrated. A brighter thermal mark appeared along the projectile's flank. 12 minutes. Trajectory moved. Earth's atmosphere remained inside the impact corridor. 10 minutes. The predicted strike shifted over open ocean. Still devastating. 8. The line moved beyond the continental shelf. 6. The impact probability began falling. 4. The penetrator would graze the outer atmosphere. Ren's voice entered the chamber. Come on. It was the first emotional thing Selka had heard from him. 2 minutes. The projectile crossed lunar distance. Its path had shifted thousands of kilometers from the original line. Not enough. Then the last correction accumulated. The projected trajectory moved off Earth. Nobody in the chamber spoke. The penetrator passed above the atmosphere, close enough that Earth's monitoring stations recorded the heated wake of its passage. Then it continued outward. Missed. The entire chamber exhaled. Selka did not. The Helios array was already moving again. Hundreds of thousands of mirrors rotated toward the CAR-ED flagship. Vaughn saw it too. Earth Command. His thermal alarms appeared across the shared tactical feed. The flagship's radiator structures began heating. Vaughn shut down weapons. The temperature kept rising. He reduced reactor output. Helios maintained pressure. Not enough to destroy. Enough to make fighting impossible. One CAR-ED ship powered down its weapons. Then another. Then 5. Then 12. Vaughn sat in silence on the transmission. Finally he said, "Cease thermal pressure and I will order fleet-wide weapons shutdown." Ren answered, "Transmit the order first." Vaughn's jaw tightened. For several seconds, Selka thought Pride might win. Then the CAR-ED Fleet Command channel activated. All vessels, weapons safe, offensive systems offline, maintain life support and minimum maneuvering power by order of the War Marshal. Across the tactical map, crimson markers changed status. One by one. Hostile. Inactive. Hostile. Inactive. Hostile. Inactive. Within 90 seconds, the invasion was over. The CAR-ED fleet still existed. That somehow made the human victory feel larger. Earth had not needed to destroy it. The council chamber remained in emergency session for another 6 hours. Human repair craft reached the first damaged CAR-ED ship before the politicians had finished arguing over what to call the battle. Selka watched them dock. That detail mattered. It should not have surprised her after everything else. It did. Myra Vance transmitted Earth's surrender terms directly to War Marshal Vaughn. They were brief. All offensive systems would remain disabled. Carred ships would accept human navigation corridors while leaving the system. Crews would retain control of life support and internal security. Damaged vessel would receive emergency assistance. No personnel would be detained unless individually accused of violating human law. The Carred would withdraw. That was all. No demand for territory. No reparations announced in the middle of the crisis. No public humiliation. Vaughn accepted. First Speaker Vedran requested the floor shortly afterward. He looked older than he had that morning. The Galactic Council formally recognizes that its prior strategic assessment of the Sol system was incomplete. Selka almost laughed. Incomplete. A beautiful political word. Soft enough to survive history. Myra apparently thought the same thing. She said nothing. Vedran continued. Given the demonstrated use of the Helios array as a defensive weapons network. No. Selka spoke before she consciously decided to. The chamber turned toward her. Vedran's expression darkened. Commander. No, Selka repeated. She walked to the central console. Her report was still open. She displayed it above the chamber. I request permission to correct the record. Vedran clearly wanted to refuse. He also clearly understood he could not. Proceed. Selka looked at the delegates. Then at Myra. Then at the white points surrounding the sun. The Helios array was not a concealed weapons system. The Carred representative rose. That is plainly false. Selka turned toward him. No, I inspected it. And it defeated our fleet. Yes. Then it is a weapon. Selka shook her head. That conclusion is the exact error that brought your fleet here. The chamber quieted. Selka enlarged the original engineering files. Helios was built to collect and move energy. It did that today. Another file. It was built to track millions of moving objects simultaneously. It did that today. Another. It was built to reorganize itself during emergencies. It did that today. Another. It was built so the failure of individual nodes would not cripple the larger system. It did that today. She looked at the Carred representative. You saw separate civilian functions and assumed they remained separate during a crisis. Then she looked at Vedran. So did I. That was harder to say. She said it anyway. My assessment measured dedicated weapons, military hulls, known batteries, and defensive platforms. By those measures, Earth was weak. Myra watched her quietly. But humanity did not build its system around our categories. Selka highlighted the Helios network. They built power infrastructure that could redirect power anywhere, tracking systems that could track anything, industrial platforms that could manufacture whatever was required, communication networks that could reorganize millions of independent nodes, emergency protocols that could place all of it under unified control. Her voice dropped. We counted weapons. She looked at the white points. They counted capabilities. Nobody interrupted her. Selka opened the classification field of her report. Civilian infrastructure. She deleted it. A menu appeared. Military. Dual use. Strategic auxiliary. She ignored all three. Commander, Vedran said, those are the available classifications. That is another problem. She opened a blank entry. New categories required committee approval. Normally. Today, nobody stopped her. She typed, Integrated Civil Defense. Then beneath it, Capability unrated. The chamber read the words. Selka added one final note. Do not assume purpose limits function. She saved the file. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the council system asked for secondary authorization. Vedran stared at the new classification. Selka waited. Eventually, the first speaker placed his hand against the authorization plate. Approved. The record changed. A line of text. That was all. But Selka knew institutions well enough to understand what such lines could become. Every future council assessor studying a planetary infrastructure network would see the category. Every fleet planner reviewing an unfamiliar civilization would see the warning. Every official who wanted to dismiss something, because it did not look like a weapon, would have to argue against the scar Earth had left in council doctrine. Myra approached Selka after the session. Most representatives had already departed. The tactical map remained above them. The Kharid ships were withdrawing. Human repair craft moved among them. You did not have to take responsibility publicly, Myra said. Yes, I did. The committee approved your report. I wrote it. Myra studied her. Selka had expected anger from humanity. She understood anger. It would have been easier. Instead, Myra asked, what will happen to the assessment division? We change. That's simple. No. For the first time that day, Myra smiled slightly. Good answer. Selka looked at Earth. I genuinely believe the report. I know. That makes it worse. Does it? Selka turned toward her. Myra folded her hands behind her back. If you had lied, we would have a dishonest assessor. Those are easy to identify eventually. And instead, you were competent. Selka did not see how that helped. Myra continued. A competent system reached the wrong conclusion using accurate information. That is more dangerous. Selka looked again at her revised classification. Yes, but it is also fixable. Selka glanced at her. Myra nodded toward the tactical display. You fixed the first line. Then she walked away. Selka remained in the chamber. Outside the station, stars burned without concern for politics. The council had existed for thousands of years. It possessed databases larger than some civilizations. Its analysts could calculate fleet logistics across hundreds of systems, predict political instability decades in advance, and model the collapse of economies containing trillions of citizens. And still, a civilization the council considered militarily weak had just taught it a simple lesson. A mirror was a mirror. A factory was a factory. A power grid was a power grid. Until someone needed them to be more. The Kharid fleet reached the edge of Sol 12 hours later. Not one human warship chased them. They left under escort from small patrol craft, while human repair vessels remained attached to 2 damaged cruisers until their drives stabilized. War Marshal Terk Valn transmitted a final message before crossing the boundary. It was addressed to Earth Unified Command. Selka saw a copy because the council was still documenting everything. The Kharid Ascendancy recognizes the defensive jurisdiction of the Sol system. We will not re-enter without permission. Director Wren replied. Understood, safe transit. Nothing else. No boasting. No warning about what would happen next time. No reminder of the battle. The Kharid already remembered. So did the council. Selka returned to her office after 20 straight hours awake. Her staff had left the lights low. On one wall remained the original map she had used 6 months earlier while preparing the Earth assessment. The Helios array surrounded the sun in millions of white points. She had stared at those points for weeks. She had measured them, categorized them, reduced them to sections and tables. Civilian, industrial, environmental, commercial. She had believed that naming each part meant understanding the whole. Now, on the same map, every point had returned to its ordinary orientation. Climate mirrors adjusted temperatures over Earth. Power sails fed orbital factories. Relays carried civilian communications. Industrial reflectors guided energy into asteroid refineries. Nothing looked military. Nothing looked dangerous. It looked harmless again. Selka opened the original report. The old sentence was still visible in the archived version. He LLOS array, negligible strategic value. She placed the new assessment beside it. Integrated civil defense. Capability unrated. Do not assume purpose LIMITS function. Beyond the station windows, the last Kharid vessels disappeared from the system map. Selka watched their crimson markers vanish. Then she looked back at the millions of quiet white dots around the sun. They had never been hiding. The Council simply had not understood what it was looking at.